But you raised the right point. Should the president, the singular president, should he have to share the presidency with 300 district court judges? No, absolutely not.
We do know that judges do get to say whether the executive is complying with the law or not. That's been the case for decades, hundreds of years.
Well, I think there's a difference between saying whether you're complying with the law and then you have these individual district court judges setting effectively broad federal policy that is specifically reserved for the president of the United States. I think we do have a constitutional crisis, and it's being caused by these judges. They're not here to tell us. They're not here to tell us how to spend the money. They're not here to set broad federal policy. That is the president's job as elected by the people. These judges are supposed to be settling discrete, specific matters, not policy setting. I think Vance is right. I think Trump has a point. And these judges want nothing more to continue the lawfare against
I don't think anybody's going to be surprised to hear that you think Trump is right.
They're doing this on
one of the main disputes is whether the executive branch can just decide not to spend money that another co-equal branch has said ought to be spent. So it's not just about forcing the federal government to spend money. It's saying Congress said you need to spend this money this way, and the executive branch saying, no, I don't feel like it, and the courts say you have to
Well, my answer to that simply is, it is the executive branch's job to figure out how to spend money once it is appropriated by Congress. And sometimes they spend money that's not been appropriated. But the correct political control is between the executive and the Congress. I get it. You want individual federal judges who hate Donald Trump.
No, I don't.
To tie him up for 4 years.
No, I don't.
If you want a big policy questions decided, let the Supreme Court do it. But in the interim, the executive has to be allowed to govern.
How do we get to the Supreme Court? Can somebody tell me?
And that's fine, but you can't tie them up
we get
until
to
it
the
gets
Supreme
there.
Court.
You can't tie them up
we
until
get to
it
the
gets
Supreme
there.
Court by the judge's ruling, things going to appeal, and then it goes up.
And in the meantime, what happens? Trump can't act?
In the meantime, you're supposed to comply with the court's rulings. Am I wrong about that?
Well, you're supposed to comply, but Scott's absolutely right in that the court cannot say you have to spend these dollars today. So as a governor, I dealt with this. We got things challenged in state court and federal court. It's all judge-shopped, by the way. Judges don't randomly get these cases. There's a reason that these cases are filed in Boston, the Boston court, or a certain district, Rhode Island, because they know they're going to get a judge that is politically
great
favorable.
bipartisan practice as well.
Yeah. Both sides do it. I mean, I think
how many times that district court and judge one guy in Texas shut down Joe Biden?
But you raised the right point. Should the president, the singular president, should he have to share the presidency with 300 district court judges? No, absolutely not.
But the point, though, you made a really good point that there have been judges that shut down some of President Biden's executive actions, and they understand, the Biden administration understood the checks and balances.
The Supreme Court tried to stop me, but they never will.
But not in the way that Donald Trump is.
Who said that?
Not in the way that
Joe Biden.
Yeah,
Joe Biden.
But Scott, he actually didn't ignore it.
He did. They continued to plow forward with student aid.
How
much did they spend?
Let me set the record up.
We actually got deep into
I hated the student loan forgiveness policy.
What did he say out loud?
I thought it was a ridiculous policy. I thought it was unconstitutional. I predicted it would get struck down. It did get struck down, and I applauded. He did not ignore it, though. He went and tried under a different law.
So he ignored it.
You're allowed. No,
that's not ignoring it.
That
is trying to be
But let me just understand where you stand. If a district court judge rules in a way that the president dislikes, should the president listen or should the president defy?
If a district court judge tries to usurp the authority of the chief executive of this country, he should absolutely defy it. There's a difference between broad policy decisions and discrete disputes between parties. That's the difference. If I want a policy decided, I'll take it to the Supreme Court.
What about checks and balances?
Well, Scott, you're
of a district court judge who elected them.
What I can't get with
branch to spend the dollars. You can't do that. They can't say we're going to start. The judges are going to start writing the checks. They have every right to
Have you
hold
heard of the Impoundment Control Act of 1974?
No.
Russ Vought, who is the architect of a lot of this, was being questioned in Congress about the Impoundment Control Act, which actually says that the executive branch should spend the money how Congress appropriated it. Here's what he said is going on right now in the federal government.
Do you believe the Impoundment Control Act of 1974 is the law of the land that you must follow?
It is the law of the land. As you know, the president has run on that issue. He believes it's unconstitutional. For 200 years, presidents had the ability to spend less than an appropriation if they could do it for less. And we have seen the extent to which this law has contributed to waste, fraud, and abuse.
So, Ellie, this is the law of the land. They might be wanting to challenge it, but it is the law.
Right. The Impoundment Control Act says essentially the president cannot block money allocated by Congress. To the power of district court judges, and I understand your point, Scott. I understand the frustration people have when a district court judge blocks a broad mandate from the chief executive, the elected chief executive. Ultimately, you know, the big issues go up to the Supreme Court. But I guess I would ask both of you, what if a district court judge had blocked Barack Obama's DACA plan, the Dreamers plan, right? And he said, heck with you, I'm doing it anyway. Would you be okay with that? Or would you have a problem with that?
No,
would that be okay?
So again, that's where we're forgetting a key piece of the third branch of government. That's where Congress steps in.
Yes.
Right? You have to remember that a judge can't just say, well, I'm going to arbitrarily block something. They say, I'm blocking it because of this, and Congress can step in and be more specific and more refined if they want to.
Well, how does that work with Congress, who's appropriated funds for all of these other agencies?
So it can't work that
now,
way.
And now the executive branch is stepping on Congress.
If Congress appropriates $20 million for a program, do you, as the chief executive, do I have to spend $20 million on that program?
Well, actually, this is what I'm trying to. This is why I brought.
Because if I don't, what's the number?
I know that the impoundment. Do a bit of an investigation into it first.
I know that the Impoundment Control Act thing sounds really wonky, but I guess the point I'm trying to make is that I understand the idea of testing laws. You want to see how far you can go, but the question that you are asking has been answered by the courts, okay? The reason that the Impoundment Control Act exists is to say that when Congress says we appropriate this money, it should be spent that way. That's their power. They have the power of the
Every
purse.
state in the country, when we pass a balanced budget, and I'll explain what a balanced budget is
Again,
to everyone
it's
in
a
Washington in a minute.
dispute, but I'm
we don't
saying
spend, this
that
called
hasn't
lapse.
been proven
There's
in
hundreds of millions of dollars in New Hampshire that intentionally do not get spent on certain programs.
What
They're supposed to lapse
about
back into
when the
system.
Trump administration says to Congress, you created this agency, we're going to just decide it doesn't exist anymore?
He runs the executive branch. He can decide who works for the executive branch.
So where does this end? So Congress creates an agency. The executive says, to heck with it. Congress appropriates money. The executive branch says, to heck with it. Where does this end?
So it ends. You can go back, and I like what they're doing, and they're going to whiteboard these programs out, and they're going to force each of these departments to come back and actually justify their existence, which no one in Washington has done for decades. If you want NIH money to go forward, explain to me why, how, and how it's going to be spent.
All right, so the next Democratic president who says ICE is going to just disappear, I expect that the two of you will say that sounds...
I think all of America...